Okay, George Durkee back with the last video in our series of creating a search and rescue map using ArcGIS Pro for our class Geography 61. And as I said in the last video, we're going to do two things. We're going to just print the map at whatever scale works best here, just to see the whole search area, and that'll be sort of along the lines of a briefing map, though we won't make it that size. It'll be an IAP overview map. And then the second thing we'll do, and it'll be a demo, though I would encourage people to actually try it, is we'll do a what's called a map series, where we'll print each segment, and it'll be automated by the map series tool within ArcGIS Pro. So first, let's just do a standard layout here. So go ahead to Insert and New Layout, and let's just do 8.5 by 11 landscape. Though depending on the map and depending on who you want to see it, and how big it ought to be, you can choose other sizes. And as a side note, for planning, I often found that a so-called C size map of the area, 17 by 22, was a good size. It fit on the table and just showed the topography, and then the planning team could look at it and start planning out the map that, as the GIS person, you'd then convert into geospatial data and then start putting out maps. I just throw that in for those of you who may be doing SAR maps or even fire maps. That size works well for planning and just sitting around a table looking at it. Anyway, let's choose the letter size landscape. And there's our paper size there. Now we put in the map frame, and I'm going to choose the map we already have showing, and of course we can vary that later and just draw it in here. Give it some margin, and then it fills in with the actual map we have up. And there we go. That's a reasonably good scale for what we want to show. We want to show the search boundary and all of the segments, and there are clues that we have. Ideally, you'd actually want to show the INYO's work as well, but we're just concentrating on Sequoia Kings right now. So let's go over to Layout, and we're going to center the map a little bit better. So if you remember, we activate the map, and then we can actually use our Explore tool, our hand tool, to move the map itself. If we hadn't activated it, then we would have ended up moving the whole map and not the actual map within our frame. So that's pretty good there. We're at 1 to 37. 1 to 37. Let's try and make it an even number. And I made it 1 to 37.5, or 1 to 37.7. And ideally, well, not ideally, but 1 to 24 is really the standard map size that a lot of search folks are used to. So to get that, you might want to make a larger map. And our labels are kind of crowded in together there, but I mentioned in the last video that to solve that, you start fooling around with how to weight those labels so that maybe the points themselves are dominant and move the labels over, but that takes quite a bit of time, and so I skipped that part. And of course the other solution was simply to convert them to graphics or an annotation, and then you can click on them and move them to where you want, because we're now at the stage of the map where we want to print it and send it out to folks, and that's the fastest way to do that. Okay, so that's roughly where we want it. So let's go back to Layout and up to the Layout tab. Let's close the activation because we now have it pretty much where we want it. And I clicked outside to get rid of the little size control tabs here so you don't accidentally move the map frame. Okay, now we'll just put in the elements. We'll put in a legend and north arrow, a scale bar, and the same constraints apply here. Is you don't want to interfere with the terrain that the search people, the SAR people, want to be able to see. So you don't put anything within the search boundary, so you fit them in here in the corners where, and maybe in the upper right here where there's no search going on. So I'm just going to put them in here. I think you guys either should remember or refer back to the fire video on the last on printing and putting in map elements. And if you remember, just to get you started, you use the insert tool and then start going through these elements. And so I'll come back, I'll have put them all in and you can see what we want to have in there. Okay, so I've added the basic map elements, and the legend took a while. What I had to do was convert all of that to graphics and then move things around within, and then ungroup them so I could make the box the right size. So that took some manipulation. But if you've got room, I also made it into 2 columns. But if you've got room, you can just make one size there. I added a text box, Barrett Lake SAR, the date, operational period 3, Kings Canyon National Park, and a north arrow, a scale bar for distance, and a scale for the map scale. And then over here, you sometimes add your name and the date you did the map and the time you did the map. So if you have a series coming out, you want folks to find the most recent map. So if we had more time here, we'd spend more on the cartography, how a map looks. But as I keep saying, we're just moving right along here, and I would strongly recommend folks to take the ESRI massive online or open online course, MOOC, on cartography. It's truly a great course, and you just learn a lot about label placement, size, typeface, and how to make a map look good. So here's the actual search map towards the end of the search. Notice how the upper part of Doozy Basin was covered pretty extensively. This has the GPS that were put in our example. The segments, they're much lighter colored here. Here's an example, much lighter and don't have as good boundaries. And the I use the halo effect and blue for the label. I did put in the tracks here with a little arrow showing the direction, and I had it contour with how the line went and identified tracks seen by helicopter 552, and then an actual clue symbol for the footprints. No, otherwise, you know, everything else is here. Here's the search on the Inyo here, and how extensively they did it. And go down here. Notice I didn't put in a legend, and once again, for that, we're depending on how search people recognize the symbology already. And when you use standard symbology, sometimes you don't have to put in a legend, so you can consider that when you're doing your map. I also want to mention this is missing some GPS tracks. A lot more search was done down here in Doozy Basin. A bunch of teams were in there pretty extensively and didn't find anything past the tracks. Now, unfortunately, the search went on for about 6 days, and then weather started moving in again, a major storm. And so then you have to make decisions on how extensively you've searched and you know, can you do anything else? And in this case, unfortunately, the decision was made to suspend the search. You never call off a search until a person's found, but you suspend it, which means that uh, you keep doing the search, but with fewer resources. So all the helicopters and people and so on and so forth, need to be sent home. A lot of these volunteer searchers, they have regular jobs, and they can leave for 3 to 5 days, but really can't extend beyond there. So a lot of times you're just rotating teams in and out, but you just do the best you can. So what the search operations people do when they incident command look at the entire search and try and look for any holes, anything they might have missed, and then again, with the weather coming in, decide what they can and can't practically do. So as I said, the decision was made to suspend the search. And basically, winter moved in and covered all this area with several feet of snow. By midwinter, it was up to 10 feet of snow. Early on, actually, a few flights were made looking for any tracks, any hope of him having survived anywhere, and never saw anything. And unfortunately and tragically, in the spring, his remains were found right on Bishop Pass, just a few yards to the north there, and behind a boulder. So he's trying to take shelter, and probably in a whiteout, couldn't find the trail, and just took shelter and probably died of hypothermia there. And as I've said several times throughout, these fall storms are extremely dangerous. People are often not well prepared. And don't seem to realize that it's winter conditions. By the time you get into mid-October, you could easily get into winter conditions. So I'll run through the print operation here and just quickly here, and then I'll move on to show you how to do a map series print. So printing is reached from share, and then we want to print the layout with the handy little printer icon there. And the print layout dialog box comes up. It's in landscape mode. I've got it set to legal, but we just want letter size. And here at the top in PDF, but it could just go straight to the printer, or you can fax it depending on the drivers you have. And the output quality, it doesn't have to be high. It's just to reduce the print time. You can reduce it to normal or even fast, because we're just going to see it on a screen in our case, and we don't actually have to print it to paper. So the fast gives us a resolution that's still more than acceptable. And a couple of you sent it to me in PRN format, and I think the mistake there might have been that you printed it to a file, and the PRN is the standard print file type in Windows. So you don't want to do that. So make sure that you've chosen PDF at the top. But in the past, we actually have had problems where people may not have Adobe installed, and you may then not have a PDF print capability. So if you want to install Adobe Reader, that should give you a PDF driver. Anyway, go ahead and print. And the print dialog box comes up. And so you want to give it a logical name. So let's give a date, 2021 0321, say, and it'll be Barrett Lakes SAR. It'll be IAP map, and the orientation is it'll be 8 by 11, and it'll be landscape. And we want to make sure we put it in your folders, your incident data, and products. And then it printed successfully, so let's take a look. And in my case, it just shows up automatically, and that's okay. It's not one of the greater maps we've ever made. Again, the crowding in here, we should have worked with a little bit more, but all the basic elements are there, and tells the searchers, so they can just be given this map in an IAP, and they know what their search area is going to be. And this area here, segment 1, would certainly have been divided up into smaller segments, as would segment 4. And so now let's do a map series where we're able to customize it according to, in this case, the polygons, which will center and try and create a map for each segment scaled at 124. And the idea is to be able to give a customized map to each team going out. And the nice thing about Arc Pro is that we're able to create a number of layouts or even maps and customize those, whereas with Arc 10 we couldn't do that. Each layout, you'd actually have to create a new layout, you'd have to zap the old one and create another one, though there were workarounds. But anyway, now we can actually just create a tab with a whole new layout and then go from there. And we'd also do data-driven pages, incidentally, from this one, and preserve our map elements. But I just want to take it from the beginning, so let's just go ahead and create a new layout. So here, let's go to Insert. We insert a new layout, and it'll be another letter size landscape. And map frame, and we'll do, for the moment, the size we have there, and we'll draw that in. So once again, let's center this a little bit better. Layout and activate. And let's move it over, center it. That's pretty good. So back to the Layout tab, close activation. Now for an assignment map, we actually don't want our GPS. We just want the segments, the clues, and the SAR points, last known and all that sort of thing. Sometimes you do want the areas searched, but that is the GPS tracks. But usually when you're handing these out, there hasn't been any search effort yet. I'm going to click outside, so we no longer have the map frame active. And finally, let's save. So for this, we right-click on the layout in our table of contents, and we choose Properties down here at the bottom. And then Map Series. And on the drop-down here, we can either choose Spatial, or we can choose a bookmark. We're going to choose Spatial. But if you'd bookmarked the series of what you wanted, it would have just done that. So for instance, if you'd actually focused in on a set of segment 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and saved them as bookmarks, it would have printed them as that. And so for a small number of maps, that actually might have worked well, but I'll show you the spatial part here. So it's pretty much set up here. We're going to use the map frame. We want it to center on the SAR segment layer, and you'll notice we have the choices of perimeter and pretty much everything else we've drawn, but we want segments. The name of the field we want is the segment. That's what we want it centered on, and the sort field will be segment. So it's going to sort on segments 1, 2, 3, and 4, and you can choose any sort field that you want, but that just makes sense. It's got a drop down for optional fields, but we don't want to add anything like that. And for the map extent, you have a number of choices there, but in our case, we actually want it at 1 to 24. And we're going to see how that works out. It might be the wrong scale, but I think it'll work out okay. And then you just click OK, and it clicks and whirs and creates a map for each of those segments. And this is great when you have 20 segments drawn. You create this in just a minute. And then when you're finished, in your table of contents here, it shows each map it's created. And notice that you've got an icon up here for list the map series pages. So if you switch to 2, double click that, it switches to map 2. And it's centered on segment 2, and the same with segment 3, as you remember was the trail buffer. And so unfortunately for that one, it didn't print out or didn't show that this was segment 3, and it's actually kind of crowded up in here, but we'll just go with this. That's another argument for making it graphics or annotation, so that you can just click on the label and then just move it over to where the trail is. Okay, I'm going to wind down here. There's a lot of other stuff you could do. So from our original map that this is all derived from, you can put in the north arrow and the scale, and you'd actually put in a text box with dynamic text on which team, which segment, and which team it's for. You could put in a safety message and all sorts of other things that you'd want an individual team to know. In our original map SAR, we'd have the radio call number of the team assigned, and that was into dynamic text, so it would change with each map created. So it was an excellent workflow, though the dynamic text and so on was a little harder to get in. But in any event, let's wrap it up here, and we'll go to print these maps into PDF, and then that'll be it. So to print the map series in all 4 pages here, we can go to Share, go to Layout, and notice that this gives us an actual drop down for map series. So you just go down here and map series, and then you can choose all pages or just a few of the pages, or page 1, 3, and 4, or something like that. We're going to print all pages, make sure that we've got letter size, landscape, all that's correct. We're only going to make 1 copy, and we don't want to print to file, so let's go ahead and print. So it's printing a PDF page for every map page, and so that's taking a little bit of time here. So the same thing here, wants to save it, and so I'm highlighting the Barrett SAR just to get the name put in there quickly, and the same thing, except this will be page 1 to 4, and that'll tell us that we've got 4 pages here. And then enter. Then it clicks and whirs for a while, and we can go through the pages over here. So each segment now has a PDF shown for, created for it, and so that's actually pretty good. So it would have been really useful to add a scale bar, and we could have done that for each map back in Pro. But if you create a series, it should actually preserve the scale bar and the north arrow and all that, and it just make the map behind it. So if you put it in once, it'll reproduce all the way through, and you can actually then move it around if if you remember, the legend was up here, and if the map for that segment, in this case the trail, and you had your legend here, then in that map you'd actually move it over. Okay, so I think that's all we're going to do for the map series, and for the class you don't have to do that. I just wanted you guys to see it and know that it's there to use if you ever needed it. So that does it for SAR mapping, and if you guys ever have any questions, give Jeff or I a email, or come on by Jeff's office. I don't have an office, but I know Jeff would be happy to help you guys. So that's all I've got. Thanks.